we have organized this special event as part of our month-long celebrations commemorating the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Indian Constitution. OP Jindal University is celebrating the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Constitution with month-long events and initiatives in November 2024. We have had Nukkad Nataks, which is street plays, Grand Constitution quiz, constitutional amendments debate, photo exhibitions, panel discussions, mock constituent assembly debates, mock constituent assembly sessions, radio podcasts, mock judicial debates, constitution hackathon, and photography contest on the frames of the preamble. And today we have all gathered here to discuss and deliberate on the interesting topic, which is digital ESGs for Viksit Bharat. And we have with us today a very esteemed guest, Dr. B. Shadraj, who is Director, Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia. He earned his PhD in Information Sciences from United Kingdom. Dr. Shadraj, until recently served the Commonwealth of Learning Canada as Skills Advisor, where he started a new program initiative, which is very interesting, Skills for Work, to impart employable and job-ready skills among the people of the Commonwealth in collaboration with national governments and local organizations. In his career since 1986, he has managed ICT for development and skill development programs in over 40 nations around the world, working for organizations such as the International Development Research Center, One Word International, Transparency International, and the British Council in India. Dr. Shadraj has also been giving consultations for UNESCO, Geneva, ADB, Philippines, UNDP, Bills and Melinda Gates Foundation, World Wide Web Foundation, Practical Action, Open University UK, and the ICT Agency of Sri Lanka. We welcome you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we are waiting to hear your interesting talk on this topic.
Thank you so much. Can you tell me how long do I have? How many
you
minutes?
have half an hour, sir.
Half an hour, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Reshmi Butts, Professor Maushmi Mukherjee, who has invited me to speak in this very interesting and gathering. Congratulations on celebrating the 75th Constitutional Day, which is approaching in 2 weeks' time from now. And as a university, you stand as an exemplar for promoting not only education and skills, but also scholarship to the entire world. So I congratulate Professor Rajkumar, Professor Maushmi Mukherjee, and others out there at UP Jindal in doing a stellar service to the nation. Thank you so much for inviting me. And today I've been asked to speak to a topic which is very interesting for me because I am also learning as to what this topic really means to the larger world, particularly to the young people who are gathered there, if I understand correctly. Can you tell me if my screen is in full or if it's visible fully or
This is
partly?
visible, sir, but not fully.
Not fully. So I think the same issue, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'll once again try to share.
You can put this on slideshow.
How about now?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah,
fully.
it's perfect. Perfect now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. Very interesting topic has been chosen for this particular day as you're commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Constitution. You've come up with ideas, 3 ideas basically. If I can break the title into 3, we are talking about Viksit Bharat, ESG, and digital ESG. So I want to spend a couple of minutes deliberating upon these 3 interesting concepts that we are encountering in the modern world. Viksit Bharat is a very interesting idea. The Prime Minister had proposed in one of his speeches for the nation. He had basically focused on what he calls Gyan for Viksit Bharat. Gyan stands for Garib, Youth, Annadata, and Nari Shakti. So his Viksit Bharat vision, although, when it comes to the vision, I would elaborate upon the ambitions as a country India has. But he wanted basically the foundation for Viksit Bharat to be founded on this Gyan principles, ensuring that the Garib, the poor people, young people, farmers, and women are the mainstay in steering the whole Viksit Bharat process. So that's something very interesting for us, because oftentimes when it comes to any nation building exercise, we often look up to only the industrialists and policymakers and also the decision takers. But here the president wanted us to focus on these four segments as the nation builders for the future. And with this Gyan, Garib, Youth, Annadata, Nari Shakti, the Prime Minister wants to really build a $30 trillion economy by 2047, where the per capita income would be about 20,000 US dollars per person. So the whole vision of Viksit Bharat is built around India having a world-class infrastructure and facilities, both in rural and urban areas, which is slightly an antithesis to the current development model, which is centered around the cities. Although India also has a lot of missions, Atal missions around cities, the Prime Minister vision is to ensure something similar to what Professor Abdul Kalam professed when he was the president, to ensure that rural and urban areas are equally given importance. And there are quite a few goals and ambitions outlined in this Viksit Bharat mission. But as a visionary statement, I want to pick up one of the many. There it is spoken about the self-reliant India. The Prime Minister also recognizes that 3-4 global champions in every sector. So if there are 60, 70 sectors in the world, at least 3 or 4 global champions in the likes of the Tatas and the Reliance and the Adani Group and others would emerge. That's his vision. But what is very relevant for the ESG, digital ESG, thinking, is that in the Viksit Bharat vision, we have the idea of fostering green growth and climate action by increasing renewable energy capacity and reducing carbon emission. So this is something that he has squarely placed as one of the challenges. And taking from there, the Niti Aayog is building a roadmap, basically where they are looking at democratic dividend, given that India is a young country, at least for now, and at least until a good part of the Amrit Kal, what they call the 25 years of our time leading to Viksit Bharat 2047. Niti Aayog recognizes the digitization and digitalization infrastructure and what they call the phygital economy, physical and digital economy combined. And they're also focusing on climate change, globalization, deglobalization, and de-risking principles, but taking the full advantage of AI, artificial intelligence, basically to effect a structural transformation leading to K-economy, digital economy, green economy, and supply chain revolution, and so on. So these are all very important for us to take into account, because when it comes to green economy, the Niti Aayog looks into the major sectors: transportation, energy, urbanization, housing, circular economy, green stack, all these sectors very seriously. So the roadmap is built around this idea. So what is happening? That's Viksit Bharat for us. India has this, great ambition of becoming a $30 trillion economy by 2047 by focusing largely on climate change and energy transition and a range of issues around ESG. Now let's look at the ESG itself. ESG is, as they say in the SDG world, in each of the 169 targets and 17 goals, you can see ESG very well ingrained. The triple bottom line, as they say, what they missed out in the MDGs. In the SDGs, they brought in the triple bottom line, social, economical, and environmental principles. So ESG, if it were to be basically realized, we need to have industries that employ the Gyans, Garib, Youth, Annadata, and Nari Shakti to have environmental stewardship, social value proposition for stakeholders, and the leadership and the values, philosophies, and the internal processes are aligned to the ESG goals and principles. So what is ESG? ESG is not about values. Sometimes companies really put out some very flowery, interesting statements saying that, oh, we are environmentally conscious, we are this, we are that. But that's not ESG. ESG is all about the ability of any institution to create and sustain long-term value in the new world. Long-term value, which is basically measured in a variety of issues, which we'll come to in a while. For example, ESG should be seen not in slogans, but in their daily practice of, say, diversity, equity, inclusive principles in hiring, involvement in management, in all overall processes of the governance of an institution. In the 1980s, we had a focus on environmental and health safety. In 1990s, it turned into sustainability. In 2000, it became corporate social responsibility. Now today, as ESG since 2010 onwards, for some time now, it's a holistic concept of corporate risk management, reward management, and competitive advantage seen in the prism of environment, social, and governance. It becomes all the more important because in the recent past, we would recall that the BP's US Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010 actually resulted in $53 billion US billion fine for them. Volkswagen, for instance, they rigged almost 11 million vehicles to pass the emission test, which was actually detected, which became a major issue in Europe. Cambridge Analytica, for instance, in 2018, where they actually compromised 87 million Facebook users' data. These are all issues that emerge where you basically pay attention to the environmental, social, and governance issues institutions have to be really serious about. Because corporate reputation can be lost, risks are very high, and to build an organization once again after losing a reputation is opportunity cost. And the culture and value system within the organization needs to be very constant and stable. It can't really fluctuate. So basically today we are in a world where we are marrying ecology with economics. That's the mantra today. And that's what the SDGs have given us. And, yesterday when the COP 29 meeting started off for 12 days, many of these issues are likely to be discussed. So recapping what I mentioned in a kind of in those three examples where risks are at stake, the growth opportunity would need to be responsible, the organization needs to be resilient. We are seeing a lot of issues that are emerging. Stakeholders need to trust you, your organization, and the culture within the organization needs to be not so much competitive or profit driven, but collaborative and responsible for all actors, stakeholders in the process. When it comes to ESG, today we seem to see a lot of important issues raised up. In COP29 also these things would emerge, not only climate change, but the issues around natural resources scarcity. To what extent we are depleting the water resources which are scarce, or the forest resources which are very important. So how do we deal with natural resources? How do we deal with pollution and waste management? How do we reduce the risk for humans, physical risk and the transitional risk? All these are being accounted for in the ESG principles. When it comes to the social factor, um, as much you are responsible for your investors, how much you are responsible for the community where you are placed, how much you are engaging your community, and to what extent you are responsibly sourcing your product, particularly upstream, and how is your relationship and engagement with employees, customers, and the communities that you serve. All these factors are seen to be extremely important. When it comes to governance, as I alluded earlier, diversity in the board, the stakeholders' trust, and long-term value creation, and ethical reporting. If you don't report ethically, if you inflate your data and make it really nicer for the investors, you are really caught in today's ESG world. So investors are actually looking for greater clarity, guided by ESG issues today. And even the customers and the supply chain partners who are seen to be part of the company's footprint are really watching you. Employees are looking at the higher purpose that you are bringing in. This is where Gen Z, the millennials, are actually expecting a lot from the employers that share value proposition for the larger good. And of course, the civil society and the community has always been conscious of the fact that if a change process is happening, is it for community greater goals or is it for narrow wins? So today we are looking at not just a company's performance, how they are actually managing their supply chain, and how they are actually, even to the extent of looking into the third-party contractors and their responsibilities to ESG. So we are going actually deeper in this discourse. Now, I wanted to deliberately put out this particular slide just to show that today's millennials and Gen Zs are extremely conscious of the fact that they want to actually associate themselves and invest and their time and efforts in institutions, so, those that are responsible for towards ESG. And Gen X is actually in middle, and baby boomers basically do not really care at this point in time. But that said, this is a factor that we need to be conscious of, that today we are living in a world that the young people are much more conscious of the environmental factors. So where do we stand with this in the Indian scenario? I want to quickly run through the Constitution itself, because you were celebrating the Constitution, and the Constitution very clearly protects and guarantees a lot of things. Article 48A, for instance, protects and improves the environment and safeguards forest and wildlife. Article 51A, Section G, calls for the duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures. And many of us may be oblivious to these things, but these are enshrined in our Constitution. And as you are celebrating the Constitution, we also cherish Article 14, where every person within India has the right to equality before the law and equal protection of laws. Article 17, for instance, abolishes untouchability and its practice in any form. The protection of civil rights are guaranteed through the Act in 1955. Article 21A provides right to education. Article 23 prohibits trafficking of human beings and forced labor. These are all issues, where ESG pays a lot of attention to. Article 24, for instance, prohibits employment of children in factories, mines, and other hazardous employment. We know the Nike case where it was seen to be the sourcing was seen not to be appropriate. Article 38 calls for the state to secure social order for the promotion of welfare of all people. So the Constitution, if you really look closely, has a lot of things around ESG, and it's full of ESG if you actually analyze each of those articles. But since COP27, where the Prime Minister went out and made a lot of promises, we want to also be conscious of the fact that there are ambitious targets to meet. For instance, the current emission level of 3.6 gigatons of CO2 would double by 2030, which means India would be the highest emitter by 2020 in the world. So taking cognizance of this, the Mission 2070, Mission 2070, where India would become a net zero emitter, is a promise made. And in COP26 summit, we said that by 2030, we would decarbonize the energy sector by 50%. There is a conundrum here because India is highly dependent on carbon-intensive industries, and it's facing ever-growing energy demand. Actually, these demands were there for China and USA some 15, 20, 30 years ago, whereas India in its growth trajectory is actually facing enormous energy demand. And in India also at this point in time has a very inadequate renewable energy infrastructure. So at this juncture, this is where I think the Indian government leadership has been very bold in promising that there would be net zero by 2070 and 50% by 2030 in the energy sector. And we would also meet 50% of our energy requirements with renewable energy, reach something called 500 gigawatts of non-fossil energy capacity, and reduce almost 1 billion tons of projected carbon dioxide emission cumulatively. And we have also promised that we'll reduce carbon intensity in the economy by 45%, above the 2005 level. So there are quite a lot of promises made. But I think what is becoming really, really difficult to meet these ambitious targets is reporting. When it comes to reporting, Scope 1 emission and Scope 2 emissions are easier for us to relate with because Scope 1 is basically the institution's internal consumption and emission. And when it comes to Scope 2, it's upstream. But Scope 3 is what is making it a little difficult. And if you all have the time to look at the difference between Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, I would encourage you to look into it because Scope 3 emissions relate to the upstream and downstream of the supply chain and very difficult to ascertain at this point in time because Scope 3 emissions account for 80% of the emission of any sector, any industry at this point in time. So we have an inability to assess Scope 3 emission, but the government has been bold enough to put out some interesting mandates. 2% spending on CSR through the Companies Act is a very bold step by the government where the mandatory spending is enshrined. SEBI has come up with what they call the BRSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, for the top 1,000 listed companies, where very clearly set KPIs have been laid out. Now, there is some problem with regard to these 1,000 companies actually meeting the KPIs and also, going beyond the current stage. We would ensure that we would like, thousands, tens and thousands of companies to comply with BRSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, in the days to come. But there are certain issues that we are facing at this point in time. Not only the inability to capture data, but there is resistance from value chain partners, the complexity of value chain mapping and management, the increased compliance and monitoring costs a lot of money at this point in time. The legal and contractual implications are high. So we are actually in a situation where, although there is a willpower, the systems are not well grown at this point in time. And this is where I want to also point to the people who are assembled today listening to this talk. If you're a young person in India, you have a bright future even through ESG consulting. ESG consulting, by 2030 globally would be a $25 billion business. Whereas in India, at this point in time, it's just merely a $225 million business. So you can imagine that the highest emitter and also the one that has promised really big for the world would need to have a lot of systems in place for ESG, which means a lot of you would take up easily the career of ESG going forward in terms of becoming data analysts and ESG analysts and so on, because the growth would be phenomenal. At this point in time, it's 160%. It could grow even up to 1000% going forward. Now, there is also, when it comes to India, an issue of lack of public awareness. Now, many of the public, let alone people living in rural areas and grassroots communities and households, people in urban locales, they are not able to actually relate with these ideas of ESG at this point in time, as though ESG principles are only applicable to the companies. That's how it's seen. So it's basically the awareness is very low, which makes it really difficult for actually the government to do what it has promised. For instance, if a citizen or a public citizen is aware of ESG, he or she would now make a very informed choice of buying clothing from a responsible company, or even sourcing products, or even deciding as to whether he or she would like to drive a vehicle all alone or go for a shared driving, pool driving facility. So there are quite a lot of things that the public could do. And the government has come up with life mission and various instruments for the public also to consider. Now, I talked about the BRSR and the KPIs that are becoming increasingly difficult for the companies to comply with, because if you look at the attributes are around fairness principles, attributes of or bringing openness in business, enhancing employees' well-being and safety, gender diversity, water footprint. I mentioned about water earlier, greenhouse gas footprint. The BRSR also looks into circularity in economy and the inclusive development principles. So they've come up with very measurable KPIs for companies to comply with. And this is something that, the Gen Z is likely to pay a lot of attention to. So the question to be asked is, does it pay to link compensation of CEOs and senior executives to the ESG principles and the performance of individual companies? What is likely to be the generational gap among the investors? Who is likely to invest in ESG responsible companies in the future is a big question to be answered. Now, Professor Mukherjee, shared a paper with me in which very categorically, the digital ESG components have been spelled out by this company DQ, collaborating with United Nations and various other UN agencies. But I wanted to really focus a lot around what the digital ESG can do for the following issues. Now, we mentioned about net zero emission by 2070. How do we monitor net zero target with the timeline? We are unable to report on scope 3 emission, and a variety of industries are not able to do so. Apparels industry, for instance, food and beverage and agri industry are not able to really report fully on scope 3 emission. Fossil fuel and manufacturing companies are not able to report fully well. Biotech and healthcare companies, infra and power generation companies, even services industry are not able to really comprehend the enormity of ESG reporting regulations today. So, can digital ESG answer this question of capturing Scope 3 emission data in various sectors, monitoring the net zero target timeline, our inability to grapple with the upstream and downstream activities, particularly when it comes to upstream, there are a variety of issues that come into play. Upstream would mean where do we purchase goods and services? The capital goods that we procure, or the fuel and energy related service that we procure, the upstream transportation and distribution that we use to our own business travel, employee commuting, and upstream leased activities. All these are very important for us to capture, not just what is happening within the institution, but the upstream functions relating to the institution. But once the institution and the corporate produces a service of value or a good or a product of value, the downstream emission would need to be also captured, whether it is transportation and distribution of our products, whether it is processing of our sold product, how we package those and distribute those, how we use our sold products, what is the end of life treatment of our sold products, how do we actually deal with the purchased goods and services, the franchisees that we engage. All these are to be looked into. And this is where it becomes really complex, because the supply chain is very fragmented, and the reporting standards are not very unified. Data availability and accuracy data, we have some problems, and there are also policy and regulatory gaps, particularly in terms of implementation and also their compliance at the Mufassil towns level and small towns and rural areas. And there are lack of incentives for companies to follow. So before I close, I want to also come up with some ideas for our young people to think through, because I was also told that code for digital ESG and the hackathon is all about full of ideas where our young people could come up with solutions. Now, what are the solutions that perhaps you could come up with as people who are a part of OP Jindal community? Can we come up with a baseline? Can we come up with a kind of a AI-based or a digital-based solution for identifying emission sources, capturing data, and also quantifying emissions? It's today it becomes increasingly difficult for us to quantify emissions, because different industries quantify it differently. Can digital ESG enable us to come up with a kind of a solid data capturing strategy? Of course, the data capturing and risk reduction strategy would need to be scientific. But how do we basically bring science-based targets in a strategic manner, where business targets can also be spelled out? Can AI help with predictive analysis? Can we come up with a carbon reduction strategy for the upstream and for the downstream? Can we identify the steers for reduction and incentives for reduction? How do we engage, in the digital world with the suppliers who would need to actually live through these strategies and these principles that we are putting in place in our corporates? Can we come up with a revamp of supply chain methodology itself? Can digital ESG enable us to design for change or design for sustainability? Can we also focus more on circular economy, where data becomes really a vibrant factor, and digital connectedness and AI enables us to come up with a robust recycling and disposal strategy for the circular economy? So in closing, I would like to really mention that various companies, particularly the senior executive, are looking at a variety of ways to basically look at ESG principles and how to prioritize ESG in their real life as they carry forward with their companies. Now they see that assessing ESG data from multiple sources rather than a single data provider is a priority. Many of them see that relying on external managers to undertake deep proprietary research and analysis is very important. It's not enough that internal research, relying on internal research is good enough. Some of them also feel that they need to increase the size and expertise of in-house ESG teams. So a variety of issues are really looked into by the corporate leadership as we speak. But we have quite a few of opportunities with regard to energy management, climate change monitoring, climate change predictive modeling. Various IITs in our country are into predictive modeling. We need to really monitor the deforestation that's happening rapidly, and a variety of things that we could do. So with these few thoughts, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to share some of my thinking. More than solutions from people like me for digital ESG, I think the solution lies in Gen Z today. Solution lies in the ideas of hackathons and the ideas that the young people could produce today to lead the world, because Viksit Bharat is all about Garib, youth, Annadata, and Nari Shakti. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sadraj. This was really a very enlightening talk. And I'm sure your talk is going to really inspire our students. And the fact that this talk is getting recorded and we are going to share it even outside this university with the youth at large, especially someone like you who is an expert in digital education, which is something is very important to for also expand access to education. So we will definitely share this talk of yours, this inspiring and enlightening talk of yours with a larger audience of students across the country through digital platforms so that they can get inspired to really take this challenge. And as you highlighted, we have made grand promises as a nation. We have to deliver, and it's in the hand of our youth to really code for change to bring about the change and meet the promises that the Prime Minister and senior leaders have made. Thank you so much. My colleague Reshma Vats is now going to coordinate a short Q&A session. And I'm sure there are some questions and comments from the audience on campus who just heard you. Reshma, go ahead.
Thank you, Moshmi. Thank you, really, Dr. Shadraj. It has been a great pleasure listening to your talk. The interesting part is how you how you broke and divided the title, which means that how you wanted to look at each aspect with lot of depth. You also talked about ESG not in slogan but in action, which is very important. Another aspect that I absolutely liked about your talk was the marriage of ecology and economics, which is very important nowadays. The detail in which you dealt with BRSR KPIs and how can AI assist in strengthening ESGs, which is very interesting, and the brilliant ideas that you have given to the community, Jeju community here, that they can be ambassadors of digital ESGs in future. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And I would now open the floor for questions from the audience. The floor is open now.
Please come forward and speak in front of the mic because it's being recorded.
We have a mic here.
Oh, good. But
Yeah,
still,
right.
come in front. Why don't you come in front? Because you're not visible. Come in front. Come to the podium.
Thank you, Professor Shadraj. Uh, I have been using AI, and the first time when I started reading about it, the data point that came was for every query that you put on ChatGPT, every 3 queries that you put, it's literally like you're using half a glass of water, right? And we are promoting AI to counter for or to help us manage the ESGs. So and it is an energy guzzler. It is increasing day by day. If we integrate AI into every aspect, managing supply chains, I have worked in supply chain. I can understand whatever you were saying about these being very fragmented and untraceability of the movements. The kind of data that will go, the kind of sophistication that is required to track and monitor real time, probably could we end in a situation where we are generating more harm to, or creating more harm to environment, just by trying to find what we are doing as opposed to trying to solve that problem. Just a thought on that.
No, this is a very good question. When it comes to energy consumption by the big tech companies, these are extremely high at this point in time. And it is important for these companies to also introspect and ensure that they follow the ESG principles in order for them to actually move away from the solutions, the sourcing that is dependent on power grid and variety of e- uh, emitting, sources. So as much, AI is seen to be an answer to the complex data-enabled decision-taking processes for the world for the future, we also need to see how best the environmental impact of AI is mitigated, whether it is through multi-objective optimization of energy solutions that are used in AI companies, as to how they basically develop efficient training algorithms, which do not really end up in uh, billions of tokens and consumption of burning of energy beyond one's capacity today, as we know. So the carbon efficient scheduling for AI compute is something that very many companies are looking into and very many governments are looking into. The data utilization efficiency is also something people are looking into. So there are quite a lot of environmental oriented AI models that people are coming up with as we speak. And from a governance point of view also, there are issues that are really looked into, particularly in AI intensive companies where the fair work practices, whether these are followed or not, whether there is a lot of biases within the companies. How do companies deal with job displacement, and whether they are coming up with algorithm transparency? Are they able to explain their algorithm in a manner that people could appreciate their approach? So the issues with regard to big tech companies, digital companies, and AI companies are not just environmental, but also social and governance oriented. And these are taken very, very seriously. And one is looking at how one can mitigate all these in days to come. Unfortunately, we have entered a world where AI seems to be ruling, and there is no looking back. We cannot really stop even the moratorium asked for by Elon Musk and others were not adhered to. So the research is progressing, the AI world is onsetting, but at the same time, we need to look into responsible and ethical use of AI, where the ESG factors, the impact on environmental, social, and governance challenges are also mitigated. But you put a very good question. The answer is still unknown, I would say, because it's all ambitious targets that we say that AI companies should become ESG oriented and responsible. But how things would turn out is a kind of $1 million question. But it becomes inevitable. You have a necessary evil in the room called AI.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand. It's a complex and it's still very fast evolving. Hopefully, before we destroy ourselves, we'll be able to find a solution.
I hope we don't destroy ourselves. Rather human in the loop of AI is much more important than human out of the loop of AI, because if we let AI take over, the biggest threat to the entire world, as people would put out, is AI today. So we need to actually rein on this big bull in the room. We can't really let it go. So we neither can destroy ourselves nor allow AI to destroy us.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the audience? Dr. Anika, would you like to ask something? Yes. So Dr. Shadraj, we have Dr. Anika. She's a faculty at OP Jindal Global University. And you will be happy to know that she's launching a course in this coming semester on digital ESGs.
Wonderful.
Oh, well, it is, in fact, not really digital ESGs. It's more the ESGs, corporate social responsibility, corporate environmental, social, and governance under a responsibility approach. But the digital aspect is very interesting because it kind of kicks in just now. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very much appreciated. And a very interesting coincidence that I, come up with that course just now. And I was told by students that within minutes, all the seats were taken. We now expand from 40 to 60. It might be even 80 students who, it's just very quickly filling up. So there seems to be major interest. I have a little bit of a presentation prepared. Let me see if I can open that. So I was actually advertising the hackathon in my class, but yeah, Diwali break, and then now end semester tests, and but my notion is also that we're not really prepared. So this brings a lot of, we need to have a lot of knowledge of a lot of things, not just the use of AI, but then also the application to the ESGs. Can you see my presentation? How can I move this? Just by pressing this? So I have maybe 10, maximum 15 minutes to say. How do I move this? Oh yeah, please do.
Meanwhile, I'll take this opportunity to introduce formally Dr. Anika. Dr. Anika is an associate professor working on climate-related public policy issues for more than 15 years. She has studied at Free University Berlin, UC Berkeley, and European University. Research fellowships took her to CERI Science Pro in Paris, TERI in New Delhi, CICERO in Oslo, the Economic Research Center at Nagoya University, and RIFS in Potsdam. Anika is trained on public transport systems through the World Bank in Singapore and worked as a consultant for Agora, Adelphi, and ANU. For more than a decade, she has been teaching an international cohort of students and executives on the governance of socio-technical transitions. We welcome you, Anika.
Thank you very much. So why did I think about this course, it actually is a very timely thing, right? We have the SDGs, we had the MDGs before. A lot of American states are now required, or the companies within American states are required to report on SDG related statistics. We have within the European Union, the latest since 2021, a new regulation coming up that mandates companies and now also medium-sized companies to report on corporate sustainability questions. So all this is kind of plus, actually. We just had the Asia Pacific Conference for German Businesses in Delhi. Then also bilateral consultations. The German government was meeting with the Indian government. 20 agreements were forged. And then also the free trade agreement, between the negotiations around that agreement are getting more and more attention again, I have to say. So when this integration is starting to continue, you see that, and he mentioned scope 3 emissions, for European companies who trade with India or the rest of the world, they will have to look at where are parts, where are sources, where are resources sourced from. So that will have to be integrated. So ideally, in this bilateral case, or yeah, let's call it bilateral, it will be important for the Indian side also to be prepared for the integration to be more smooth. So we have the E, the S, and the G. Our speaker has already mentioned it. We're trying to develop some sound corporate governance. One of the major issues is bureaucracy. A lot of what I hear from the German side already is that they feel a heavy weight on their shoulders with regard to reporting, and this is just going to increase it. So the idea of AI coming in can make a difference. It can make things a little easier for the companies. At least that's the hope. What we are trying to do with the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS, a standardized framework that wants to create consistent and comparable ESG reporting across European companies to assess and improve corporate practices and potentially attract investment. So the idea is, the more transparent they are and the better they perform, that would actually attract investment. I don't want to go too much more into this here. We've already heard the speaker before me kind of laying out what the different, what the acronym ESG stands for. There are more than 30 aspects to it. I don't want to go too much into detail, but for me, as a person who specializes on environment and energy, I'm very much interested in the E and everything regarding net zero. How can we actually radically decarbonize primarily corporate emissions? So the ESGs have a comprehensive coverage. Here, the G, I kind of lost the slide on S. Have to add that again. But the E's, for example, energy management, very important. How can we decarbonize? How can we reduce fossil fuels across jurisdictions? I think that one of the most central aspects of the transition to net zero. Greenhouse gas emissions, water management, biodiversity, waste management, but then also risk assessments. And towards the end of the talk and then also the question. We already came to talk about what are the risks of AI in doing all this, in this major exercise of getting that data and optimizing company performance. And that's actually one of the major issues that we are facing. We have at the International Energy Agency a conference coming up in early December that looks exactly at this very aspect of data centers using up a lot of resources, a lot of energy. So they themselves become an issue. We have now, besides the term environmental impact, also the term algorithmic impact assessment. Not just from a discriminatory perspective, but also is that data kind of manipulating our understanding, distorting actual information, misleading decision making based on information. So I think Sir has mentioned that UK AI Safety Summit from October 23rd, where Elon Musk was also present, saying that there's actually major risk associated with generative AI, or in this case, frontier AI, the capabilities and risks. And one of the major risks is actually that the promises don't materialize, that we're actually not able to use this meaningfully to get a hold of, I think, ultimately the decarbonization. That's without decarbonization, I don't think we have really a future. The Copernicus Climate Change Services, a European agency looking into climate-related data, just said that we do see the year 2024 ending with 1.6 degree above a pre-industrial level. So 1.5 is crossed. And we're not looking at 0.2 degree increase per decade. We're probably looking at 0.5 or 0.6 degree increase per decade. We still have emissions growing primarily in Asia. So even if it's somewhat unfair, it is very important that India and China decarbonize, let's say, upfront. Upfront, not even investing too much into a fossil fuel future, but into a clean future. I have this one nice example here just to illustrate the complexity of possibly an ESG assessment. There is an essay by Leonard Reed from the late 1950s, I, the Pencil, and it looks at how is this pencil actually manufactured. And it might be looking so simple and ordinary, but who is taking that wood down? How are the machines produced to cut these trees? The manpower needed. Then the metal used, the rubber. So nobody has a full understanding actually what it means, what it takes to produce this little something that is so ordinary for us. So definitely an essay that I can recommend to read. And now just look at this. I, the laptop, I, the mobile phone, and the material resources that go into that. How can we actually take all that apart and understand the implications, the complete implications across all ESG's indicators? Now, this is a huge exercise. And with that, it makes sense to think about AI, but can these algorithms be actually under our control? And they have to remain under our control, right? It has to be human-centric. I could now go into why the reporting, there's an interesting IBM report on this, I have a few slides, but I actually don't want to go too deep into this. What is this reporting? Is it voluntary? Are there benchmarks? Is there regulation behind it? How is it enforced? How do we actually get companies to do this? How do we avoid greenwashing? So all these kind of questions will more or less come up in my course. And I hope that integrating ESG into corporate strategy, ESG value creation, the measuring, reporting, the accounting, then also the investment side, navigating risk, and then case studies, people from within the industry, from consultancies, to bring all them in to get a better idea of what is actually happening right now, who's doing what, to what effect, and how can we learn from them and prepare the next generation of let me call them environmental leaders, because ultimately it is our environment that we have to deal with. So so far so good. It's a little, it might come across a little confusing, but I just got the opportunity yesterday to kind of get my head around this course. I was supposed to prepare this only over the winter break now, but this is it so far. And on the go next semester, we'll open up the bidding again, as far as I understand. So you're most welcome to join that course and yeah, have your opportunity to learn something about the ESGs and how digital technologies can make a difference in ESG assessments. Thank you so much.
So much, Annika. I feel like I want to sit in your class. It seems
come.
like it's going to be a great course. And if you don't mind, I might pop into some of your classes.
Huh, you're most welcome.
Okay. Well, Reshma, just if there are questions and comments, over to you. Thank you so much, Annika.
Thank you, Dr. Anika. You also reinforce the use of AIs, the judicious use of AIs, and also the ethical use of AIs. And your talk also, focused on net zero, which is very, very important. So my thoughts on this are that, we have to take collective action now, saying boldly, we do care. It has to be a collective action. It cannot be one person, one organization, one institution, one voice, but it has to be now a collective action. And taking help of digital emerging technologies. So we have to take help of the technologies. Thank you so much. And for the participants here, they can go ahead and read this interesting essay that she has cited in her talk, I, the Pencil. And she also asked her to think about I, the laptop, or I, the building, or I, anything. I mean, everything and everything matters, right? Thank you, Dr. Anika. Thank you so much. Any more questions from the audience? I, the university building. So we wish to thank both the speakers who, although have, dealt primarily with the, big topic of digital ESGs for Viksit Bharat, but they both gave some kind of, different perspectives to the talk, which has strengthened the discourse. So thank you so much, Dr. Anika and Dr. Shadraj. Dr. Moshmi, would you like to say anything on this? Dr. Moshmi, are you there? Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Shadraj, for joining us today, for accepting our request, which is a very, very big thing for us. Thank you for giving us such an informative presentation. In fact, you mentioned in the mail that you are not an expert of digital ESGs, but not for even 1 second we thought that such is the case. And it was such a good presentation, met with lot of attention. And third, the best thing I liked about your presentation was that, you have given us a lot of hope, saying that, although AI is the emerging technology, it is how we use the AI. And, there is a lot of potential in the emerging technology AI. So what can we do to tackle the, global grand challenges now with the emerging use of technology? Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and all the very best, and for the course that is being launched. And I hope to visit you sometime soon, Dr. Watts. Thank you.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Shadra, we really look forward to have you at
Sure. Thank you,
our
Professor.
campus and to do some more, collaborative work with Commonwealth of Learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reshma.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.
Okay, Moshmi. Bye. We are closing the recording.
मैम ये कर लेता हूँ हाँ